If there was one universal constant across the galaxy, it was this. Nobody cared about interns. It didn't matter whether you were human, insectoid, crystalline, or a sentient cloud of thinking vapor with self-esteem issues. Interns were not people. Interns were furniture. Occasionally useful furniture. The kind that fetched drinks, carried datapads, and nodded energetically during meetings they barely understood. Tina had accepted this reality exactly 3 months into her internship at the Interstellar Museum of Forgotten Technologies. Located on the unremarkable yet oddly expensive planet of Chemist, -9. She was 22 years old. Possessed precisely 1 degree in Zen archaeology. Considered charmingly naive by the wider galaxy, and had perfected the survival skill of appearing productive while internally debating whether the cafeteria's nutrient-paced surprise qualified as food or a crime against sentience. The museum itself was a sprawling tribute to irrelevance. Endless corridors housed relics from civilizations that had once mattered deeply, right up until the universe decided they didn't anymore. Every artifact represented some species' greatest achievement before history shrugged and moved on. It was, frankly, a cheerful place, perfect for a human who had once believed studying ancient alien junk would be romantic and adventurous. Spoiler, it wasn't. Tina. The sharp clicking voice of Dr. Huxaline echoed through the examination chamber. The display casing requires cleaning. Again. Tina glanced up from her datapad, where she had been researching proper coffee brewing techniques because humans were apparently the only species in the galaxy that had figured out how to make caffeine taste like something other than industrial solvent. Dr. Huxaline stood in the doorway, all 6 arms folded in the insectoid posture Tina had learned meant deep professional disappointment. On it. Doctor, Tina said, setting the datapad aside with the tired sigh of someone who had cleaned that same case 8 times this month. Huxaline's compound eyes glittered. Possibly approval. Possibly indigestion. Insectoids were hard to read. The Galactic Council delegates arrive in 2 hours, the doctor added. Everything must be pristine. Pristine, Tina repeated. Like my soul before I took this job. One antenna twitched. Tina had learned that meant Huxaline was deciding whether to be amused or irritated. Your species, the doctor said coolly, has a peculiar relationship with labor. We call it capitalism, Tina replied. With extra steps and less dignity. Huxaline made a sound like wind. Chimes being violently murdered and departed. Tina chose to believe that had been laughter. The examination chamber was the museum's crown jewel, a massive circular room beneath a domed ceiling that projected real-time cosmic imagery, dramatic, expensive, completely wasted on an artifact that had done absolutely nothing for 3,000 years. The artifact floated at the center of the chamber inside an absurdly over-engineered containment field. It was a sphere roughly human head-sized, crafted from shifting crystalline material that alternated between translucent and opaque depending on how you looked at it. Beautiful. Sure. Useful. Debatable. It was believed to be the creation of the Olmarin Sphere, civilization famous for pulling the galaxy's most frustrating disappearing act. No war, no catastrophe, no warning. One day they were there, building impossible things. The next day, gone. This sphere was one of their leftovers, found drifting in dead space, inert and silent. The museum had spent a truly irresponsible amount of money acquiring it. Tina grabbed her cleaning kit and approached the case. Inside the chamber, Pulmic hovered nearby, their gelatinous body rippling with visible anxiety. Pulmic was always anxious. If worrying were an Olympic sport, Pulmic would have swept the podium. Good morning. Pulmic, Tina called. Pulmic quivered. Tina, hello, please be careful. The delegates are very important. I'm wiping glass, Tina said. Glass protecting an artifact worth more than this planet. No pressure. Polmek emitted a noise like bubbles collapsing inward and drifted away to panic elsewhere. Tina smiled despite herself. For all the anxiety, Polmek was one of the few beings who actually remembered her name. She cleaned methodically, studying the sphere as she worked. She'd seen it hundreds of times, yet something about it always held her attention. The way light moved beneath its surface. The faint patterns shifting just out of focus. Or maybe she was just bored enough that a fancy rock counted as entertainment. You know, she said to the artifact. You could at least do something interesting. Glow ominously. Predict doom. Nothing happened. Yeah, that tracks. The next hour passed in organized chaos as museum staff prepared for the delegates. Tina was eventually stationed at the back of the chamber beside Ithker. The museum's security chief, Ithker, was a Krell roughly vehicle-sized, armored in scales that could probably stop a missile, and equipped with a tail that had once accidentally demolished a wall. He was also inexplicably fond of humans. Nervous? Ithker rumbled. Why would I be nervous? Tina said. I'm just here to look decorative and human. You do both well. That's either a compliment or deeply insulting. Ithker's laugh sounded like rocks in a tumbler. The delegates arrived in full ceremonial arrogance, 12 representatives, each more elaborately adorned than the last. Dr. Huxeline launched into her presentation, expertly describing the artifact's history, mystery, and total lack of functionality in a way that somehow made it sound impressive. One crystalline delegate scoffed. 3,000 years, and you still don't know what it does? The Olmarin mastered cognitive encryption, Huxeline replied smoothly. We believe the artifact requires a specific interaction, not yet discovered. Or it's broken, another delegate muttered. Tina snorted. Ithker's tail twitched. Her stylus suddenly caught her eye. Lying on the floor near the delegates. Perfect. She moved quietly, crouched, and reached for it. Her fingers brushed the containment field, just barely. She stumbled, caught herself, and the sphere exploded with light. Not a glow. Not subtle. Blinding brilliance filled the chamber. Sound like 1,000 harmonized wind chimes rang through the air. Every being froze. The sphere rotated slow, deliberate, and aligned directly with Tina. Oh, Tina whispered. That's new. What followed was panic, confusion, and history being rewritten in real time. The artifact tracked Tina's movement, responded to her gestures, reacted to her idle doodles by projecting solved puzzles. It ignored experts, ignored confidence, ignored authority. It responded to curiosity. To play. To uncertainty. To a human intern who approached problems assuming she was probably wrong. The truth unfolded piece by piece. The Olmarin hadn't vanished because they failed. They left because they succeeded too well. They had optimized themselves into stagnation. Perfect logic. No surprise. No curiosity. They left behind their legacy not for the smartest species, but for those still willing to ask why. In humanity messy, questioning, annoying humanity qualified. The sphere revealed coordinates, hidden facility. A cache of knowledge. And a countdown. 50 years. Solve the question they could not. Or lose everything. Forever. 3 months later, Tina stood in her new office, surrounded by equations, notes, and what Kip optimistically called organized chaos. Her new title was Chief Liaison for Olmarin Cognitive Studies, which was just a fancy way of saying the human the artifact likes. She stared at the countdown. 49 years. 9 months remaining. When I applied for this internship, she said to the sphere, I was hoping to catalog pottery. The sphere pulsed, amused. Yeah, Tina sighed. I did ask why. She took a sip of terrible coffee, grimaced, and smiled. All right, she said. Let's go solve an impossible question. The sphere glowed warmly. Somewhere, somehow, the Olmarin were watching and laughing.